Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And today, oh man, I have another special guest. His name's Mark Jordan. He's the Global Vice President of Human Resources at Brinks. And I've known Mark for a long time. And Mark, I'm so glad to have you on the show. How you doing, man?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bruce. Nice to be here, mate. It's nice to catch up.
Oh man! As a matter of fact, we were just talking before we started recording. It was, I think, a couple of years ago since I actually got to see you. So I'm glad to have you on the show today. We're going to talk leadership. We're going to talk leadership development. We're going to talk about a lot of things. And first thing I wanted to do, just for people that don't know a lot about Brinks, can you share a little bit about who Brinks is and how do you serve your customers?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Brinks. So Brinks are the global leader really in cash management solutions. So that could be anything from cash logistics, so the trucks you see on the road, to servicing ATM machines, or outsourcing banks cash processing, to transporting precious diamonds around the world, and even I don't think people realize, like when the Stanley Cup goes on tour or the NFL trophy, Brinks will take that around as well. So there's a whole plethora of things that we do as a company. We're based in we've got operations in 53 countries,
Okay.
but we actually serve customers in probably more than 100 customers and about 70,000 employees worldwide for Brinks. So been there since 1859, so 160 plus year old company, and really trying to that essential service of cash and keeping the economy going, and proud to work for Brinks, to be honest.
It's a very fascinating company. I first, I always like to reflect on when I met my guests, and I first actually met one of your colleagues, Joy Puglisi, who has been with Brinks for a long time. And I remember visiting the corporate office, and I just thought it's very fascinating, the stories around what you do and how you serve your customers. And then of course I got to meet you, and I did not know that. I didn't think about, when I think about security and Brinks, I think about money, transferring money. I didn't think about like the Super Bowl trophy or something like that. That is fantastic. I love that. Well, I've known you for a long time, but there's probably some things I don't know, and I would love for you to share the Mark Jordan story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
Yeah. So I grew up in a town called Mexborough, which is in South Yorkshire, England. Working class town. The phrase, salt of the earth people. We hear McCartney talk about growing up in Liverpool. Similar cat on his podcasts and things like that. So really loved it. Really good friends. Growing up that way. And then how I got really into HR, I actually started in learning first. So my first jobs were almost like customer service jobs. And I used to get, few compliments and things. So the management one day came to me and said, "Hey, Mark, you're quite good at answering these calls and helping people. Do you want to join the team to start training new starters, how to be an operative on the phone?" So that's kind of how it started. I started training the group of like 14, 15 new starters on, answering calls. And then for a good few years, I progressed within the learning and development world. In a place called Sheffield, that's where I worked. And then while I was doing that, because I was training people, you were also part of the team as well, of almost managing them as well. So then it started leading into more HR issues around development, and I really I really wanted to try and do more than one element of just the learning side. So I actually didn't do the whole go to college after you left school. I actually did my degree and my 2 master's degrees while I worked. So the first degree I did was a human resources degree, a BA honours degree. And that, I suppose, really got me started into the HR space. And then I went and did a master's in HR, and kind of at that point as well, I'd met my wife who's Irish. So when we was about 30, we moved over to Ireland. And the first job I got in Ireland was the lead head of HR and training for a facilities company. So they did things like they'd look after the big sports stadiums and your IKEAs and, you know, big retail, domestic security services, facilities company. So that's kind of how I went into it. And then Brinks actually approached me, and I started with Brinks in Brinks Ireland, and I was part of the Irish executive team as their head of HR. And then I moved into looking after HR for Europe, Middle East and Africa region. So did that for about 4 years. And then the CHRO at the time, Holly, asked me, would I come over to the US? And that was 2014, we moved over. And that role initially was kind of the HR leader for the corporate functions. So all the C-suite leaders and their global corporate functions in the US and around the world. So, you know, global IT, global HR, global finance, reporting up to the various C-suite leaders. And then since I've been here, I've kind of taken on, you know, more and more projects, responsibilities, if you like. So now I still do that business HR partner role, and I also head up salaried talent acquisition for the US. I head up the global learning COE and that function. Obviously, how I met you, I own global mobility. And then I also own the global travel program for Brinks as well. So the reason why I like Brinks so much is, yes, I've been there since 2010, but I've kind of grown and developed, and they've given me more opportunities to get expanded roles. So it's not like, you know, I've been in the same job for 10 years and because I don't think I'd be in any company just doing the same thing. I'm just not wired that way, you know. So that's really what I appreciate from Brinks as well, that opportunity to be able to get involved and do so much. And you know, it was a big thing moving from Ireland. I mean, my kids were 4 and 6, I think, at the time. So, you know, it was a big move. My wife obviously had to be supportive and, you know, and move over. So you know, that's, you know, one of the things I think is you look back is, you know, sometimes you've got to take these risks, you know, and you know, I think if we look back on it now, you know we made the right move, career wise, family wise, you know, standard of living and just the, you know, the people we've met. But at the time, of course, that was a daunting move to move from Ireland to the US, to Richmond, Virginia, you know.
You know, I appreciate you sharing that. I was going to ask about their relocation because that is a big move. We're not talking about to another state. We're talking about to another country. It's not just you, it's you and your wife and your children. And I was thinking about, like, as I've admired your leadership. And one of the things that I notice about you is you're always willing to raise your hand. You know, people say, hey, you know what, Mark, we think you'd be good at training. Okay, I'm interested. Hey, we think you'd be good at this. And you just have continued, and you have to make that decision that, hey, I'm willing to sacrifice, give up to go up in some cases, right? In that case, you're willing to relocate all the way from Ireland all the way to the US. And so it's got to be daunting. But, you know, that's the thing I want the listeners to hear, is that sometimes if you want to move forward, you've got to make little sacrifices. Is that right?
Big sometimes, even into it as well, big sacrifices.
Yeah, no question. Hey, I want to ask you this question, Mark, because one of the things I always like to know, you know, you didn't just start as a global VP. I mean, we just talked about your the way you've transitioned. Was there a moment when you found your lane, when you found your purpose, like you said, I love what I do? Was there a moment, or have there been moments?
I think me, even from being a kid playing, you know, what I call football, what you call soccer, I've always kind of been that problem solver, helping the team move forward, look at ways we're stuck. Well, let's get stuck in and sort this. So to me, I think, you know, when I think about it now and getting into HR, I think that is something, you know, that I'm passionate about. And I know you're very similar as well with your networking and getting to know people. And I think it's that I really do. I like solving the problems, but also helping the people, you know, from a if you look at the big strategic part of it, you're helping the CEO develop the company, or from, just somebody coming to me saying, Mark, I've got this problem. What can we do? We need to reorganize, do some some rationalization, and everything in between. I think HR, gives me the opportunity. I think the other thing HR does as well, and I really like the way you do this as well. And it's that learning, it's that passion for learning. And if you're prepared to do it, yeah, these are big steps, but what you actually learn from doing these things, and, in your case, doing your networking, doing your podcasts, and, myself taking up all these different roles and extra responsibilities, I think that helps on my passion of learning as well, though. So, like I say, I don't think I'm a person who could have been in the same job for 10 years doing the same thing. It's not just me. So that's, I think, my aha moment, if you like. And it was pretty early on, actually. And I think it was more like, hey, I can make a difference here. I can help people, and I'm not, I won't be in a role where I'm just part of the process. I'm actually part of the solution, if you like, almost. I think that's what, I liked or saw in the HR role. Like I said, started in training, but because that training, I was working at the time with, fellow training managers, and we had a supervisor on the team, but you were almost managing your cohorts as well, if you know what that year ago. And that's kind of how it led me to believe. Now, as I say, there's been other issues like dealing with the unions in Europe and things, but even when I look at back on that now, it's, what you've learned, and I think is really interesting.
I would tell you, I interviewed, it was a few years ago for my blog. I interviewed these leaders, and I had a top 10 on if they were to give some advice, what advice would they give? And number one was continuous learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as you talk here, that's a common thread for high performers. They just have this curiosity and this passion, because the more you learn, the more you can help others.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it almost keeps you going as well, I mean, because if not, you're stuck in your ways and your routines. And I think you've got to be a bit humble as well, early on in your career, and realize you're not good at everything, and nobody is. So what you do is you go and surround yourself with people who are good at those things you're not. You go and learn as much as you can about it. But at the end of the day, no one's good at absolutely everything. We've all got our strengths and what we're really good at. And I think there's a bit of humility there, where you've got to realize that at some point.
I was listening to a John Maxwell podcast, and he recently talked about if you're still thinking about what you learned 5 years ago, you've stopped learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of truth to that statement, because our company has now implemented some Dale Carnegie training. I took Dale Carnegie 20 years ago, but I'm kind of excited to take it again to kind of refresh.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because at the moment with my fellow peers around the globe in what we call our global HR leadership team, as I mentioned earlier, I own the learning, COE, and we've just built a global leadership development program, and it's made up of, similar to what you're saying. So we're using COVID learning modules, Stephen Covey learning modules. There's going to be diversity training for managers, and then there's going to be like performance management and owning your career, and all three elements make up the global development program. So we're actually in the process at the minute of rolling that out to 1,000 leaders. So listening to you talk about that, hopefully I'm going to get that same passion from some of our leaders, and I know I will, because I think one of the reasons why I've been with Brinks so long is it's the people. And you mentioned Joy, and you've even met the previous CEO, haven't you, Doug? And it's the beauty about Brinks is there's no airs and graces. You can go and shoot the breeze with the CEO and all the C-suite, everything in between. And I think that's a big issue. I personally think as well. At the end of the day, when you leave a company, you're not going to miss the work, are you? You miss the people. The work's going to be similar wherever you go, but I think that is key as well, is having the right people in a company. And at the minute, as I said, we're doing a lot of work around culture and as values, and not just from a diverse standpoint. We're trying to change the business, and have we got the right people on the bus? What do these new skills look like? So there's a lot of really what I'd say like fascinating work to, change this 160-year-old business, but you've also got to protect what you've always done as well. So it's kind of, a bit like you were saying with Armstrong, like changing that, but at the end of the day, you've still got to protect that core, which at the end of the day is your haulage, moving people around business, haven't you? But you've got to evolve through technology and making things better. And
wow, your learning and development program, it sounds exciting and exhausting at the same time. That's a big, I mean, that's a big, but how exciting, because you know that when you develop your people, everything around you grows. It just does. And what's even more exciting is when people get on board and you can start seeing that progress, and then they start engaging on what they're learning. That's when that's when I really get fulfilled, when I hear them start talking about it.
And it's like Bruce, the CEO or whoever can stand up as much as they want and say, we want you to do this and we want this culture. But unless you actually show people and they learn and have an appreciation of what, you're not going to change it. Anybody could stand up and put a poster up and say, I want you to do this. You've got to actually put some action and do it as well, So that's kind of what we're working on at the moment, trying to change, move forward with the business really, and try and look at new innovative ways and solutions and products, and it's all part of that process.
Hey, well, let me ask you a question as we talk about this. I always like to ask about, if you have had any like mentors or people that have helped you get to where you're going. I'm curious about that, but I'm also curious about this learning and development program that you're working on with your team. If mentorship is part of that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, within the COVID modules, there's elements of trust and mentorship and coaching. And yeah, I mean, to answer your first question, I think throughout all my career, like if I think back, even the people who, dare I say, took the chance on you, so even if as far back as the person who agreed for me to go on my first degree, and the ones who saw something in me and said, hey, Mark, do you want to train these new starters and have a team of 15? And so I think, throughout your career, you've got to have people who either want to invest in you, or, dare I say, have got your back, or they just see something in you and they promote you. I mean, I'm not a big component of, that they'll do it for me. I mean, to me, I'm passionate about you've got to own your own career. If you don't do it yourself, no one's going to do it for you. But you can't do it all. You still need that, whatever you want to call it, luck, break, person to champion you. So that's really what I think of, some of the mentors. Even my boss now, like we'll have one-on-ones and he'll give me, feedback, and it's not always like positive as well. And I really appreciate that's what it does. Then I'll go away and I'll think and I'll, oh yeah, that's really good. And it's like that really. It's not necessarily like someone giving me, words of advice all the time, but to me, what's important is knowing, what, that person took a chance on me, to be fair, or they saw something in me and they gave me the opportunity. You still got to take it, my first ever gig training those people all that time, but I still had to stand up there and do it. So there's always that element of someone can push you, but you still got to do it. But I do think, to me, that's what you need. You need someone, and that's what I try and do with my team. And I'll get them involved in different projects, or like even if we're doing a catch up with my boss who's a CHRO, I'll bring them in and I'll get that, and I won't even talk. I'll just be quiet, because at the end, I mean, I always joke with my boss and I'll say, look, you see my ugly mug every day, but you don't get to see, and interact with my team and things as much. So I'll purpose, and I'll just be as quiet as I can, and try not to interject. So I've always, I think, consciously and probably subconsciously as well, always thought about those people who gave you, it's like anything. It's like in sports, into the person who scouted you, or the person who, unfortunately someone gets injured, you take your chance. It's the same in sports and thing. And I think you need those people. But on the other hand as well, Bruce, I actually think I've learned from some of the people who maybe weren't as good as well. And I think, like, especially early on, I think looking at them, almost thinking, you know what, if they can do it, I can. I think the opposite as well has helped me from, early on, or a few bosses where I thought, oh, you shouldn't really be treating people like that. I've kind of took that side of it as well. So not just the positive people who you think, oh yeah, the real. I actually think some of the, dare I say it, not so good leaders have influenced me as well. In my career.
Oh man, I love that. I love that. I always talk about when I go into networking events, I'm influenced by two different people, the people that are just very passionate, warm, friendly, welcome, engaged. I'm also influenced by the others that are not. And it shows me like what do I want to look like when I go in is very helpful for to be both ways, right?
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you this. I always like to ask this question to my guests because leadership, when people are talking about leadership, it's like it has so many definitions and there's so many different ways to have success. I'm curious if someone said, hey, Mark, what is leadership to you? How do you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, from my standpoint, obviously, being as passionate with sports, there's definitely that coaching element, supporting others. The element I just mentioned about, giving people their chance to shine and their break. But to me as well, what I've always witnessed from good leaders is not being afraid to just roll up your sleeves and get in there, and be part of the team and walk the walk. So I think to me, that's good. But from my personal standpoint, like I say, either being young playing football as a young kid in England or whatever, it's that almost that coaching, supporting others so they can be their best, and ultimately, look, let's be brutally honest, you are coaching and mentoring to help the company achieve their objectives as well. But that's really how I'd see it's that supportive, and I think that's probably a bit of my own personal leadership style as well, like knowing that what you're doing is supporting the business to achieve their goals, whether it's the CEO or whoever in the company, at the end of the day, HR is a support function, so you're there to, but what I think really sets apart a good leader is it's that having that passion to really understand the business and what the business does. So I would imagine, like in your case, Bruce, you probably started your network journey thinking, what do these HR folks do what I'm looking after? And then it's kind of just grown from there, hasn't it? It's that, I think, like the reason why, she said it to me, like Holly at the time, the CHRO, why she brought me over. It's because, she said, like, it's because I almost know the answer to the question before they ask me, because I've took the time to learn their business. And to me, I think that's a respect thing, like if our CFO comes to me, I think that I need to know his business and learn his business to help and support him. There's no point just getting an HR textbook out. You've got to know what the actual department's doing and the needed, whether that's like a talent succession 9 box, so what the people are. So when you go into the conversation or anything, a bit of reorganization, doing a RACI chart to see who's responsible for what, just really understanding the business. And as I say, I would imagine it's helped you from your networking and now your SHRM work and knowing HR as a function, which now helps you ultimately support your customers, who 9 times out of 10 are HR leaders, aren't they? So it's a similar kind of thing, I would imagine, from what you've done as well.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you shared that because, I've had people before, they're like, hey, why are you immersed yourself in, in the HR community? I'm like, well, they're my business partners. They're my customers. So I want to know what they're thinking. What do they do? And how can I help them? And mobility is part of that, but it's not all of that. I want to know big picture. And so as you shared that, and by the way, if you're listening right now, you need to be writing this down. I loved what you said about leadership. It's about coaching. It's about giving people the spot. I love that, giving people the spotlight. And I think one of the things that we need to remember, we got to roll up our sleeves. We got to show people that we want to get out there. Many times I'll go out to a moving job and I'll bring drinks and everything. And I'll show them, hey, I'm out here with you, and I've done that before. And so I love all of this that you're sharing. And as we talk about this, though, it really is about, I remember when I took my first certification, the PHR. And the lady, very first thing she said, you've got to know the business. She didn't say you got to know HR. You've got to know the business. And so as you talk about this, that's what I want people to hear, is that if you want to add more value to the organization, you really need to understand the business, and you can do that by having conversations, right?
Yeah, and then HR or doing your SHRM or going on things, that arms you with a set of tools to be able to go and help the business. But at the end of the day, you need to know what you're using those tools for, So you can go and study, and I did my master's and my degree and learned all about HR theory and all things like that. But at the end of the day, unless you know how to apply the tools, you could have 50 books on your bookshelf. You've got to be able to do it and understand why you're doing it. And, I always use this phrase, like, what's the difference that makes the difference? You've got to be able to understand that in terms of, you've got this knowledge, you've got this experience. How can you help these leaders, either improve their people, the process, the structures, whatever the issue is, and I mean, even as something as, Mark, I've got a problem, I need to put this guy on a pip, what do I need to do? Even that, you need to pull out your certain set of tools and your coaching skills, there's, to me, that's the most important thing. It's knowing how to use your tools.
I love that. And you said, what's the difference that makes the difference?
Yeah.
Write that down. That's a quote. That's a quote right there. Hey, well, we got together a couple of years ago, and you recommended a book to me, and I read that book, and it was a Marshall Goldsmith book. And I just remember it said, it was the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yeah.
And as we talk about learning and things today, I was just wondering if you would share, just for the listeners, what we've talked a lot about what has got you here, right? We talked about how you raised your hand, how you get involved, how you learn the business, how you connect with people, but I get that part. But what do you, as a high performer, as a top leader, what do you think about to get you to where you want to go, or to maybe, I don't know if it's next level, but just to the next?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about that, knowing what aren't your strengths, So I've really now started focusing on that. So about a couple of months ago now, I went and got myself a Lean Six Sigma black belt. So I did an online course, because again, it's, I'm very much a problem solver, roll up my sleeve, get things done. If there's a crisis, call Mark. But sometimes, my nature is I'm not going to sit there and do a regression analysis, and I'm not that. So, but I realized to get more rounded and know more things, this is what I need to do. So as I say, I went to do that Lean Six Sigma black belt, mainly because in Brinks, because we're very operationally based, and if you think about the branches and the trucks, there's a lot of lean processes trying to make it different. And then even within the organization, from a salaried standpoint, we do a lot of value stream maps. So for example, one time I might sit with the salaried recruiting team and say, look, let's map out the process from start to finish and look at the bottlenecks and how can we improve it. So we do have like a lean philosophy, if you like, in Brinks. So I did that. And then as we speak, I'm on a course. I signed up for it. It's a 7-week course through the Wharton, the Pennsylvania Business University, and it's called HR Management and Analytics, Unlock the Value of Human Capital. And it's, so what you do is every week there's videos, there's presentations, and you have to do like a mini assignment every week. So that's really what I'm doing, is look, I know, like to your point, I know what's got me here, I know what my strengths are and things, but to get to that next level, I need to develop my not so good strengths, for want of a better term. I mean, I'm never going to be half as good as some of the people who I admire have those strengths, but that to me is the next level. There's no point focusing on what you're good at all the time. When you see these Tom Brady's and Ronaldo's, there's a reason why they're on the field 3-4 hours practicing stuff that isn't normal for them. You've got to develop yourself, in my opinion anyway, and improve these skills. That's I would do it.
Well, by the way, congratulations on your Six Sigma black belt. I mean, good grief, that is a lot of work. And as you talk about this, I think about, man, you're busy. You are busy. It's real funny. When I first started years ago, I was on the operations side, and then I moved over to sales and marketing. I used to wonder, why does anybody ever return my calls,
Mm.
these sales calls, and I realized
Yeah.
people are very busy. But one of the things that was in this book, the Goldsmith book, was about teaching people not what to do, but what to stop.
Yeah.
And as I think about all of these things that you do,
Yeah.
all of this time it takes, and you still have your family, you still have all your personal life. How do you know, like, have you found yourself, are you getting good at stopping things that you don't need to do anymore? How do people, any insight on what
Mm.
people should think about when it comes to, okay, you're doing it, you've been doing this for a long time, you got to stop doing that now, and now you have to
Yeah.
do this next.
Yeah.
Any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, um, I think it goes back to that old, don't try and boil the ocean, do 2 or 3 things that really, going back to my phrase, make the difference. But I also think, and going back to the Marshall Goldsmith, I did a course a while ago to become like a certified Marshall Goldsmith coach. So, and I've worked with a few people, and I think where people struggle sometimes in management is they almost they get really good, but then they don't almost trust someone to do it. It's like, well, no one's better than me, so I'm going to do it. And I think that is a key element here of you've got to, like I mentioned earlier, you've got to give your staff the limelight. You've got to pass things over and trust them to do it. And throughout my career, the managers who I've seen struggle or maybe doesn't have a great relationship with their team are the ones who like hold it all in and don't want to give anybody anything. But at the end of the day, you're not helping yourself by doing that. So you've really got to trust the people who, will work for you and with you, and let go of some things that, to be brutally honest. And I'm not just saying pass them all your admin stuff and all that. It's still got to be, a good enough project to inspire them as well, but you can't do everything. Nobody can, and I think as further up you go up the ladder, you've got to realize that, and like I say, it's difficult for like a lot of people because it's like, yeah, but I know I'm good at it, so I'll just do it myself, but you can't, because if you say that 20 times, 20 things. And then the other issue in HR as well is, I think if you're good at HR and successful, you almost end up becoming the go-to person. It's like, oh, we're going to Mark, he'll fix that problem, he knows who to talk, because you've helped that many people out that you kind of know where to go, and in the end it's like, oh, Mark knows that, he helped me last week, go to him. So in one thing, it's good being the go-to person and getting that, because it helps you obviously for your career and personal, but you've got to realize that you can't do everything though. You've got to, I think you've really got to trust your people, and as I say, I know people are different than others. Some people might trust people after seeing them do something 2 times. Some people might want to see it 50 times before they trust them. And you've kind of got to think about that, I think, because no one can do everything. Everybody needs support, whether it's your family, your colleagues, whatever. And I think people struggle. I've seen it. I've coached managers. I've seen it where the employee comes to me and says, why are they hiring me? They don't get me to do anything. And then the manager's like, yeah, but I know it, so I just do it. It'll take me 10 minutes to explain it. It's that kind of, but you've got to get past that almost,
Yeah, one of the key things I hear from great leaders is the word empowerment. They are really good at empowering their people. Hey, I want to ask you a question. And by the way, I just got back from SHRM National Conference,
Yeah,
and one of the things that was shared was what CEOs are thinking about, and the list that was put up. And I'll share the list with you, and I'll put it in the notes. But it was shared with me was the top 3 were leadership development, developing their talent. Number 1. Number 2 was the economy. What's that going to look like? Number 3 was recruiting and retention. Right there. But I always find it fascinating. Leadership development, developing talent is so important in the organization. And as you talk about what you're doing for your team, it just tells me that, hey, you're focused on the things that are going to help you get to where you need to go. Right. I'm curious, and I haven't, I gave you some questions kind of beforehand to think about, but I didn't give you this question. I'm curious. I'm also hearing a lot about employee experience. And I'm just curious, just from your perspective, when someone talks about the employee experience, Any insights around what your thoughts are, or maybe even what you might be doing with your team?
Yeah, I mean, especially within the US, it's a big project for us. And one of my peers, Karen, who's the head of HR for the US, because obviously, if you imagine in the US, we've got a lot of frontline employees, you know, the drivers, the messengers, and the turnover is really, really high within there. You know, due to a lot of factors. Same with a lot of companies. So I think the employee experience now is really coming to the fore in most companies in HR, whether you're in salary, you know, in our salaried space or on the field space. And I think, you know, I personally believe, look, you know, everybody says it's money and that, and it is, yeah, there's an element, but I still think it all comes back to leadership, because at the end of the day, Bruce, if yours or my boss were treating us like dirt every day, at some point we'd go home to us families and say, you know what, I don't need this. So I think, you know, there's a big element to around leadership developing, and sometimes I'm not talking like the top leaders. It might be someone who's come off, you know, the very front line. So the next day they think, well, I can't be the friend no more. You know, it's that mentality. So I think that there's that aspect. I think nowadays we're moving into a more environment where people are more aware of people's, whether it's mental health or any other issues, and I really, you know, I'm really passionate about that, and so is my boss, the CHRO, and we're doing a lot around that as well. You know, I think gone are the days where it's, you know, well, he just clocks in 9 to 5 and he goes home. You've got to care about your people now, haven't you, and really respect them, and you know, and realize that, you know, at the end of the day, they have got stuff going on, you know. And there's another saying I always think about is, like, even if something does something and you think, what the heck? I always try and think, someone taught me this a while ago, but what is the positive intention there? Like, people don't just wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to make so-and-so's life a misery. So, so like, for example, it could be, you know, not treating someone the right way, but really they're just trying to get the job done, and like, you know, realizing that. So all these elements, I think, all contribute to the, you know, the employee experience. And look, everybody always, and we get the stats every month, and you know, it's things like work-life balance and environment, or so, you know, all the different things. And yes, compensation's there, but I'm always a believer of, you know, if it were that bad, not many people would take the job in the first place. So that's definitely there. It gets you there. And of course, everybody wants more money. It's human nature. But then once you've got that bit sorted, how do you look after your people? How do you keep them? How do you make sure their experience is positive and they want to stay there, and they're not going home saying, you know what, I don't do this, I'm out of here. You know, so that, you know, and I think nowadays companies are really, really focusing on the outside issues as well, aren't they? Not just inside. But I think you need to start obviously inside, and that's, you know, another reason why we're doing this leadership development program. As I say, you can stand up there and say, we want you all to do this and coach people and do this, but unless you give them the tools to do it, you know, it's just words, isn't it? You know,
I love that. Everything rises and falls on leadership. I agree with that 100%. I love how you talk about, you got to give them the tools. Hey, I want to ask you one last question before we pivot to the last part of the show. And that is, as everyone goes through this program, I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking about this, I'm getting like, Mark, I have chills as you're talking about this. I'm so inspired. What do you hope that you hear from the people that are part of this program? Like when they share feedback with you, I'm just curious, what do you hope you hear?
I mean, like, because there's the three elements, obviously the Covey element, you know, I want to hear, you know, some of the insights, and I didn't think about that. And, you know, I think one of them's called leading at the speed of trust. And you know, it's all about a little bit like how we're talking about trusting your people to do the job, build them. And so, you know, after the learnings have taken place, what we'll do is we'll do focus groups and follow-up sessions. And I don't know if you've ever looked at Kirkpatrick's learning model. There's like 4 phases around how people learn, and, you know, and giving them the tools to actually be able to implement the learn. So we're going to devise the program around, you know, that Kirkpatrick learning model and the different phases. So it's like really people going on it. But one of the big elements as well is are we giving them the tools to actually be able to implement the learning, So it's all right, again, sending someone, I mean, this is not our example, but, you send someone on a computer programming course and then you don't even give them the program software to use. It's that kind of, at its basic level. And then the other element, is the diversity piece. So it's, we're actually using, it's an external company, and they're going to be delivering diversity awareness training basically for leaders and managers. So again, really wanting to shift that culture, give the managers the appreciation, the knowledge and understanding. So I hope, and then the last part about, the career mapping, and you mentioned about coaching. So the career mapping element really is, it's something we're going to build internally through, through the talent management process. And it's really about owning your own career, but also as a manager, how you can manage, or how to help your employees manage their career. So a bit like I mentioned earlier of, could you be the person who gives them that push, and here's how we do it. Here's the tools within Brinks for you. So we have a 9-box succession plan. We have a hypo plan. We've got different, forms of feedback we can give people, stretch assignments, job shadowing, but it's realizing that it's not always a promotion. Like in my case, what's kept me at Brinks is, giving me global learning, giving me global travel, expand my scope and response. So it's not always about, oh, but we haven't got a job for him because he can't move up. But there's other ways. So really that's that third element. So as I said, what we're hoping is, look, it's no silver bullet. It's not going to change overnight. Right. But at the end of the day, it's going back to my thing. We're trying to give managers the tools in these 3 sections, if you like, of elements to try and change the culture, have more of appreciation, and just, not do what we've always done, back to the Marshall piece,
Yeah, this is fantastic. When there's one word that comes to mind as we talk about everything you're talking about, and the word is care. You have to really care, because this is a big project. Listen, this is ginormous. And to go through that, you have to really care about helping your team. And I love everything you're doing. Hey, I want to ask you one last question before we shift to the last part. And that is, have you ever been given some advice you just found it was so good you find yourself giving to others? Maybe it was early in your career or your current company. Any advice you would share?
Yeah, I think that was good advice. That I think I touched on it earlier about, don't try and be all things to all people. Like don't try and boil the ocean, do everything yourself. And look, I think mostly you'll start out like that, but I think that's a real nugget that's helped me. I think about, you share the thing, give people opportunities, because you know what, people are no different than I was, who wanted to get that step up and be involved and be, part of a mergers and acquisition deal you're doing, and whatever it is. I think that's a real nugget,
That's great advice. I love that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been so passionate about investing in my network for the last 25 years, is because I don't have to know it all. All I need to do is I need to find out who are the experts in that area and bring them on. I just love that.
And as an HR, professional, if you like I respect the fact that you're spending your own time to appreciate what the function does, who you're supporting. Because, at the end of the day, you're in HR a little bit, but you're not HR, practitioner, etc. But it's that trying to understand, for you to obviously be a better, salesperson or leader for your company. But at the end of the day, you're now helping others by developing them and getting these networks as well. So I think, I really respect that from you as well.
I appreciate that. That's fantastic. Hey, I told you the time was going to fly. It just flies by. So the last few minutes, I want to ask you, time to accelerate. One question I always like to ask is, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
Listen to a podcast.
Podcast.
Yeah. So I do those blinkets, where you get 10, 15 minutes. And
yes.
If I'm going for a walk, I'll throw it in my car and you get like a 15-minute summary. But I've always, my daughter's fanatical about reading. She reads all the time. And there's an element where I think, I wish I could, but I think because the way I'm wired and I'm always, doing something. To me personally, the audio books and Blinkits and, you know, those kind of things. And then even like watching YouTube videos to learn things. You know, I'll do that a lot as well. And that's, yeah, I think I'm a very visual, like hands-on doer kind of thing than a reader.
Somebody once mentioned they like podcasts because it's real time, and I'm like, that's a good insight as well. Hey, okay, so for when you're not working, you're not doing all of the things you're doing, what energizes you outside of work?
Love spending time with my family. So we're big into our concerts, and we went to watch Paul McCartney the other week, and we went to watch Coldplay. So we like doing, you know, things like that, and traveling around. And now we've been here 7 years, but there's a lot of America for us to explore, you know, so we do that a lot. And then I love my sports, so I love playing golf, and I've just got into pickleball as well, actually. So I've started playing that, so that's pretty
is that big? Is pickleball big overseas? I know it's starting to get
not
big
really
here.
No, it's starting to get bigger, I think.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, it's massive here, isn't it, in the US?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So that's good. That's like a social aspect. So yeah, you know, spending time with the family, sports, and
that's excellent.
They've been a big passions.
Okay, so here's one last question, and it's my favorite question I like to ask. Mark, 10 years older, is knocking at your front door, and you're going to go answer that door. What is he going to tell you?
I think, you know, keep following your ambitions and your aspirations. You know, you'll get there, and keep setting those high goals. Don't continue continue to take, you know, risks, whether it's daunting or not, you know, continue to do that. Some of the things we've touched on, you know, about, you know, keep focusing on those important skills and be humble enough to realize no one's good at everything. So, you know, don't be worried, you know, kind of focus on those and try and get more well-rounded. And then, as I say, that whole, you know, try and focus on what's the positive intention here, because, you know, we're all human. Like, someone does something and you get a bit wound up, and it's like I said, most people don't wake up in the morning like to set out to, you know, ruin someone's life or something. Yeah. So normally there's a reason, you know, there's a positive intention, even if you don't see it straight away. So that's
a wise 10 years older Mark Jordan. I love that. Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate you being on the show today and just sharing your perspective and wisdom. You're definitely driving in the leadership lane. Hey, if someone wanted to connect with you, what and they heard something you said, or they just want to follow you, what's the best way to connect?
I think from a business side, maybe LinkedIn, you know, send me a message on LinkedIn, or and like I said, anybody out there, you know, listening, and any of the things I've mentioned that we're working on need any help, or they're thinking about doing something, then, you know, more than happy to, you know, give you advice or tell you what we've done, some of the roadblocks we hit, or.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. And if you're reaching out to Mark, be sure and put that in the show notes. You heard him on the podcast. You want to learn more about whatever it is you want to learn. It makes it so much easier. And so again, I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been so great. I have a page full of notes, and I can't wait to talk more about the outcome of this program. And I appreciate you and our partnership. And I can't wait to share the conversation, Mark.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Hey, I'll talk to you later.
All right.